Good afternoon from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's 12:16 p.m. on the 27th of February 2025, and it's been a rather hot day, but I think we might get a bit of a storm later. It might freshen up the air a bit and refresh the garden a bit. I was out saying goodbye to Rati, and there was a butcher bird singing majestically in the tree. She looked at me and she said, "I think we're going to get rain." I said, "Yes, the birds are very happy and that's a good sign. We might get some rain today." So today is a good day, a lovely day. So I thought I'd continue on with my reading the chapter on I think we were reading the chapter on miracles. So this is part 2, because I pegged out yesterday because I got rather tired. Right, so let us continue with part 2. The Lava Walk of Dr. William Brigham. One of the few Westerners to perform a traditional fire walk, and perhaps the only Westerner to perform the walk on red-hot lava, was, I'm just fixing my bits here, just bear with me, was Dr. William Tufts Brigham of the Bishop Museum of Ethnology in Honolulu. His account of the walk, which he performed in the 1880s under the guidance of 3 kahuna friends, native Hawaiian priests, was told to Max Freedom Long. Until noon, we climbed upward under a smoky sky, and with the smell of sulphur fumes growing stronger and stronger, at about 3 o'clock we arrived at the source of the flow. 'Twas a grand sight. The side of the mountain had broken open just above the timberline, and the lava was spouting out of several vents, shooting with a roar as high as 200 feet and falling to make a great bubbling pool. I would not have been so keen being so close to the source of such lava personally, but there's things that even psychedelic dreamer is scared of. Occasionally I can be vulnerable too. The pool drained off at the lower end into the flow. An hour before sunset, we started following it down in search of a place where we could try our experiment. Coming down to the rainforest without finding a place where the flow blocked up and overflowed periodically, we bedded down again for the night. In the morning we went on, and in a few hours found what we wanted. The flow crossed a more level strip, perhaps a half-mile wide. Here the enclosing walls ran in flat terraces with sharp drops from one level to the next. Now and again, a floating boulder or mass of clinker would plug the flow just where a drop commenced, and then the lava would back up and spread out into a large pool. Soon the plug would be forced out and the lava would drain away, leaving behind a fine flat surface to walk on when sufficiently hardened. Stopping beside the largest of 3 overflows, we watched it fill and empty The heat was intense. Having visited Rotorua in New Zealand, seeing the geysers where the water just blows out in huge geysers, like shoots high into the air and steam, and the Māori people traditionally, probably some still do to this day, used to cook their food in bags made out of flax, and they would just dip it very quickly into the pools, and it would steam their vegetables and their meat, or would literally boil their food. And if you accidentally should step into it, you would have the most severe burns, almost burning away your flesh. So I have a healthy regard for such places, having seen them with my own eyes and walked nearby. Stopping beside I read that, sorry. As we wanted to get back down to the coast that day, the kahunas wasted no time. They had brought tea leaves with them, and were all ready for action as soon as the lava would bear our weight. The leaves of the tea plant are universally used by firewalkers where available in Polynesia. They are a foot or two long and fairly narrow, with cutting edges like sawgrass. They grow in a tuft on the top of a stalk resembling in size and shape a broomstick. When the rocks we threw on the lava surface showed that it had hardened enough to bear our weight, the kahunas arose and clambered down the side of the wall. It was far worse than a bake oven when we got to the bottom. The lava was blackening on the surface, but all across it ran heat discolorations that came and went as they do on a cooling iron before a blacksmith plunges it into his tub for tempering. I heartily wish that I had not been so curious. The very thought of running over that flat inferno to the other side made me tremble. Before I continue on with that story, I'll just show you quickly the photos that they've presented here. One is of Dr. William T. Brigham, who was the director of the Bishop Museum of Ethnology at Honolulu from 1888 to 1918, which is what, 30 years? It's a long time, isn't it? Yes. Undertook the lava walk in a moment of madness when he was a young man. His boots were burned to a crisp, but his feet were unharmed. And here he is, quite a distinguished looking gentleman. And here's the other one showing the fire walkers. A traditional fire walk over red-hot stones was photographed at the University of Hawaii in 1949. Both native Hawaiians and Ha'oles, Caucasians, performed the walk. Amazing. The kahunas took off their sandals and tied tea leaves around their feet, about 3 leaves to the foot. I sat down and began tying my tea leaves on outside my big hobnailed boots. I wasn't taking any chances, but that wouldn't do at all. I must take off my boots and my 2 pairs of socks. The goddess Pele hadn't agreed to keep boots from burning, and it might be an insult to her if I wore them. It's not wise to upset the goddess. In all cultures, across all worlds, creeds, race, cultures, do not upset the goddess. I argued hotly, and I say hotly because we were all but roasted. I knew that Pele wasn't the one who made fire magic possible, and I did my best to find out what or who was. As usual, they grinned and said that, of course, the white kahuna knew the trick of getting mana, power of some kind known to kahunas, out of air and water to use in kahuna work, which is a form of healing in Hawaiian culture, not just magic, but a healing modality as well. And that we were wasting time talking about the thing no kahuna ever put into words, the secret handed down only from father to son. The upshot of the matter was that I sat tight and refused to take off my boots. In the back of my mind, I figured that if the Hawaiians could walk over hot lava with bare, calloused feet, I could do it with my heavy leather soles to protect me. His logic is flawed though, because leather is just cured, dried flesh, and the extreme heat of the lava is going to make no difference whether you wear leather or not, babies. The kahunas got to considering my boots a great joke. Yes, I'm with them. I think like them. It's just nonsensical. But white men, as I am also a white woman, have our own logic, and it's a little bit divorced from, tribal, indigenous thinking. I wonder why that is. Maybe our ancient white tribal ways were more attuned and in alignment, but with the invention of Christianity and later religions, we tend to have lost our innate paganistic tribal working with the gods and with nature in perfect alignment and harmony, which is why the state of the world is the way it is today, in my not so humble opinion. Today I saw the news, I'm a bit triggered and distressed actually, that a council in Brisbane is criminalising homeless people for having tents on public land, so they'll be fined and moved on. It's just savage and vicious and white privileged and elitist to do that to poor people who have no home. The best they can do is put up a tent on a public park for shelter. But this Nazi council, sponsored by this Nazi government, has no qualms about driving those people to even more homelessness, depriving them of basic shelter like a tent on Crown land. They'd simply prefer they'd crawl away and die, which is how the machinery of the Holocaust actually began. First they came, killed off the disabled and the intellectually handicapped, and they did it in the most subversive, evil way, inviting them into, special caravans set up with nurses and doctors, and took them quietly into another room and gave them a quiet little jab that was a lethal injection, and because they were intellectually handicapped, they didn't have the notice to think people were going in, but they're not coming back out. This is how it actually began, before they decided on the final solution around about 1938. So don't ever forget, people of Earth, as a second generation survivor of the Holocaust, my mother survived the Nazi regime, and my sexually predating, harassing monster of a de facto stepfather, that was my childhood, people. That's why I am the way I am today. Survived Mittelbau-Dora, where they built the V1 and V2 rockets that blitzed London, from where Wernher von Braun was airlifted to help the space race in the United States of America on the backs of thousands upon thousands of dead men and teenage boys as well. In fact, one person from our Brisbane Jewish community here, George Stein, also survived Mittelbau-Dora, but he was in there from about the age of 11 or 12, and my stepfather was there from the age of 18. So when I speak out about these things on social media, I'm speaking out from years and years of reading books about the Holocaust and having actual living testimony from people who actually survived the Holocaust. So when I'm seeing a repeat pattern I'm feeling in front of me, including certain bioengineered medications enforced upon us, and now denying homeless people even the grace of having a tent over their heads on a public park so rich people can worry about their view. I want to go to war on their fucking filthy, fetid, elitist heads. But we have created a generation of NIMBYism and cowardice and apathy and intellectual atrophy. That means these bastards get away with it. It's abhorrent and it's evil, and someone needs to step in and stop it right now, today, 27th of February 2025. But will they? Not likely. They're too worried about getting this power and prestige on the backs of dead people or homeless people. That's the calibre of our politicians and our council men and women today here in Brisbane. Vile, venal, disgraceful, and the purest of evil. Mama T has spoken. Right, let us continue. I'll repeat that paragraph. The kahunas got to considering my boots a great joke. If I wanted to offer them as a sacrifice to the gods, it might be a good idea. They grinned at each other and left me to tie on my leaves while they began their chants. The chants were in an archaic Hawaiian. It was the usual God talk, handed down word for countless generations. All I could make of it was that it consisted of simple little mentions of legendary history and was peppered with praise of some god or gods. I almost roasted alive before the kahunas had finished their chanting, although it could not have taken more than a few minutes. One of the kahunas bet at the shimmering surface of the lava with a bunch of tea leaves and then offered me the honour of crossing first. Instantly, I remembered my manners. I was all for age before beauty. The matter was settled at once. by deciding that the oldest kahuna should go first, I second, and the others side by side. Without a moment of hesitation, the oldest man trotted out on that terrifically hot surface. I was watching him with my mouth open, and he was nearly across a distance of about 150 feet, when someone gave me a shove that resulted in my having a choice of falling on my face on the lava or catching a running stride. I still do not know what madness seized me, but I ran. The heat was unbelievable. I held my breath and my mind seemed to stop functioning. I was young then and could do my 100-yard dash with the best. Did I run? I flew. I would have broken all records, but with my first few steps, the soles of my boots began to burn. They curled and shrank, clamping down on my feet like a vice. Don't mention vices to me right now. Still not happy, Jan. Still not happy about that. The seams gave way, and I found myself with one sole gone and the other flapping behind me with the leather strap at the heel. That flapping sole was almost the death of me. It tripped me repeatedly and slowed me down. Finally, after what seemed minutes, but could not have been more than a few seconds, I leapt off to safety. I looked down at my feet and found my socks burning at the edges of the curled leather uppers of my boots. I bet out the smouldering fire in the cotton fabric and looked up to find my 3 kahunas rocking with laughter as they pointed to the heel and sole of my left boot, which lay smoking and burned to a crisp on the lava. I laughed too. I was never so relieved in my life as I was to find that I was safe and that there was not a blister on my feet, not even where I had beaten out the fire in the socks. There is little more that I can tell of this experience. I had a sensation of intense heat on my face and body, but almost no sensation in my feet. When I touched them with my hands, they were hot on the bottoms, but they did not feel so except to my hands. None of the kahunas had a blister, although the tea leaves which they had tied on their feet had burned away long since. It's interesting, it's almost like the leaves were acted as some kind of propitiation to the gods, to whomever the god in charge of the fireworks was. My return trip to the coast was a nightmare. Trying to make it in improvised sandals whittled from green wood has left me with an impression almost more vivid than my fireworking. Yes, that would rather hurt. The unknotted noose. On February 7th, 1894, young Will Purvis was taken to be hanged for the murder of a farmer in Columbia, Mississippi. The trapdoor opened, and Will Purvis, I don't know why my hair does weird things. I washed it this morning. It's flying everywhere and has a life of its own. So, odd people there. Where were we? The trapdoor opened, and Will Purvis plunged to his doom, or would have, if the noose had not become unknotted and slipped over Purvis's head. As it was, Purvis emerged from beneath the scaffold, relatively unharmed. But he had been sentenced to hang, and hang he would. The deputies led him back up the steps of the gallows, and the noose, reknotted, was again placed around his neck. By this time, though, the crowd of 3,000 had other ideas. They had seen a miracle, and as far as they were concerned, Will had been reprieved by the highest judge of all. Singing, shouting, and praising the Lord, they treated Purvis as a hero. Utterly bewildered, Sheriff Irvin McGee led him back to his cell. Purvis's attorneys filed several appeals with the state Supreme Court, but to no avail. A new date of execution was set for December 12, 1895. A few nights before the hanging was to take place, the lad's friends spirited him out of jail, and he went into hiding. Oh, pardon me. A month later, Mississippi inaugurated a new governor who was sympathetic to Will. He then surrendered himself, and on March 12, 1898, the governor commuted his sentence to life imprisonment. By now Purvis was famous, and thousands of letters poured into the State House, demanding a full pardon. Toward the end of 1898, this was granted and Purvis was freed. Many years passed. Then in 1917, a dying man named Joseph Beard confessed to the murder, and Purvis was at last exonerated. During the trial, Purvis had sworn that he was innocent, and when the 12 jurors returned their verdict of guilty, he was stunned with disbelief. It was said that he cried out, "I'll live to see the last one of you die." Fair play if you know you're innocent. Purvis died October 13, 1938, 3 days after the death of the last juror. People still speculate about his miraculous reprieve. I'll just show you the photo and read the little blurb that goes with it. Sentenced to hang for a murder committed by another man, Will Purvis was miraculously saved when the noose slipped. Some said it was because the rope was made of grass too wiry to keep a knot. Another claimed it had been greased. Upon his vindication years later, Mississippi rewarded Purvis with the sum of $5,000, which doesn't sound much these days, but was a princely sum back in those days. Isn't it nice to see that God sometimes does look after their own and protected an innocent man from hanging. Every now and then you see righteousness in the world, and it does my heart good. Perhaps something will happen to those monstrous city councillors that want to drive homeless people into further unsafety and disarray and potentially their own deaths. May the good Lord smite those decision makers. Mamati has spoken. Put it out to the multiverse and see what blessings may or may not occur accordingly. Sharbel Makhlouf. Soon after Sharbel Makhlouf, a Maronite monk at the Saint Maroun monastery at Anaya, Lebanon, was buried in 1898. Strange lights were seen around his grave. He had been buried, like others of his order, without a coffin, and after the lights had been seen for several weeks, his body was disinterred. Heavy rains had flooded the grave, but despite this the body was found to show no trace of decomposition. It was washed, dressed in new clothes, and placed in a wooden coffin in the monastery chapel. Before long, a strange oily liquid was noticed suffusing the body. It smelled of blood and seemed to be a mixture of blood and sweat. But whatever it was, it seeped through the skin in such quantities that the body's clothing had to be changed twice a week. Strips of the saturated cloth were said to have remarkable healing properties. 29 years after Sharbel's death, his body was examined by doctors and pronounced free from corruption. Their report, together with the testimony of other eyewitnesses, was sealed in a zinc tube and placed with the body in a wood-lined zinc coffin, which was then placed in the monastery wall and bricked over. That was in 1927. In 1950, pilgrims noticed that a curious liquid was seeping through the wall in front of the coffin. 23 years later, the tomb was broken open, the coffin removed, and again in the presence of ecclesiastical and medical authorities, opened for examination of the body. By every appearance, Sharbel might have been merely asleep. His clothing was partly rotted and was soaked in the oily fluid, much of which had congealed inside the coffin. The zinc tube containing the evidence of the previous examination was badly corroded. Since 1950, the body has been examined and the oily exudation, which had accumulated to a depth of about 3 inches, has been removed from the coffin for curative dispensation. Imagine being cured by something that came out of someone's coffin though. I'd be like, what the? But I guess if it works and you're desperate, you'll try anything. Sharbel Makhlouf was canonized in 1970. 7. Blessed be. Colonel Gudgeon in Rarotonga. I had friends from Rarotonga, actually. It was my Uncle Mia. He was in line to the throne of Rarotonga, in line to be the chief, the firstborn of his father, the previous chief of Rarotonga. But he was not an ambitious man and retired from the New Zealand Army, still a private. And he was just happy-go-lucky and just loved fixing cars, had dozens and dozens of wrecks of cars in their front yard where they lived in Palmerston North. So when his father died, I think this was before I migrated to Brisbane, so it must have been in the early 80s. Don't think I'd even met my husband quite yet. Anyway, I was quite intrigued by my Uncle Mia. He was a sweet soul, very loving, kind man, very respectful of me, which is why I loved him, surrounded as I was by paedophiles and their enablers. Anyway, he was actually my paedophile godfather's full sister's husband, so his brother-in-law. But he was decent to me and kind, and I can vouch that for a fact because I used to go snorkeling with him and he would teach me how to spear fish, but I had no interest in spearing fish, but I would swim with him and was alone with him on several occasions, and never once was he dishonouring or disrespectful of my newborn adolescent female body. So, to you, Uncle Mia, for being a true chief, a king, a man of honour and decency and integrity towards me. That was rare in my childhood. Very rare. Anyway, so it came about that his father, Mia's father, passed away. And he was quite distressed, not just grieving his father, because there's traditional ways of grieving in Rarotonga, but also the fact that he was in line to the throne. He said, I don't want to go and live and be chief of Rarotonga. I said, why not, Uncle Mia? It's your divine right. You are of that bloodline. It's your island, your people. You have a responsibility to step up into that role. That's my logic. He said, you don't understand, Tanya, which I didn't. I must have been about 14 at the time, so that makes it 1979. He said, you don't understand, Tanya. It carries great responsibility, not just physically and mentally, but spiritually as well. So he says it's big, big, big mana to be a chief. And I said, yes, but think about it this way, like you'll be a man of prestige and honour, and, you know, when there's a royal wedding, you'll get to go to royal weddings in Britain and other amazing things like that. And he just sat and looked at me and giggled. He said, it's not so simple, Tanya. And I'm happy in my life here in New Zealand. I said, what? In that cold, miserable shithole Palmerston North, where you're a nobody and you just sit waiting to get old and die? Because he wasn't all that old at the time. I was 14. He would have been in his late 40s, early 50s. And he giggled again. He said, I love how you think, Tanya, he said. You really are a sweet girl. He said, but I have thought about it and I have made a decision. What are you going to do, Uncle Mia? I said. Bear in mind, he wasn't my actual biological uncle, but the brother-in-law of my godfather. He said, I'm going to I'm going to abdicate. I'm going to hand on, the chieftain, the equivalent of the crown of Rarotonga, Don't think they wear crowns though. And wrote, I'm not sure to be honest. But anyway, he said, I'm going to hand it to my brother who's second in line. And he will happily accept it because he lives in Rarotonga and he's stayed in that culture all this time. He said it's the right thing to do because he's lived there with the people and they know him and they trust him and he has the mana. I do not. Even my mother railed at him, go home, Mia, go home. Be a king amongst your own people, a chief amongst your own people. No, he says, I cannot in good conscience because my heart is not there. So he died a relative pauper still in New Zealand, and I don't know when he died, but because I migrated here to Brisbane in 1988 and no longer kept contact with him and his wife. But there you go. Fate and mana and magic does play a hand sometimes in people's lives if they want. Right, anyway, Colonel Gudgeon in Rarotonga. I knew quite well that I was walking on red-hot stones and could sense the heat, wrote Colonel Gudgeon. Yet I was not burned. I felt something resembling slight electric shocks, both at the time and afterward. I did not walk quickly across the oven, but with a deliberation, because I feared to tread on a sharp stone as my feet were very tender. My impression as I crossed the hot stones was that the skin would peel off my feet, yet all I felt afterward was a tingling sensation lasting for some 7 hours. I do not know that I would recommend anyone to try it. A man must have mana to do it. Mana in Pacific Islander and Melanesian, Polynesian, Micronesian, and in Hawaii as well. I think they're Polynesian too. Mana means your spiritual power gifted to you by the gods, your own innate core power that most people rarely ever come to terms with or exercise or utilize or see, but in times of crisis may come to the fore, in times of miracles may come to the fore. And a man who can, and a woman who can work with and manage their mana is a very great person indeed. They may not realise it, they may be like my Uncle Mia, very humble, but knowing what was good and not good and leaving the royal line to his second in line to his brother was an act of great mana indeed. Colonel Gudgeon's mana, magical power, came to him in a sense at third hand. In 1899, he and 3 other Englishmen had been watching a firewalk on the tiny island of Rarotonga, the largest of the Cook Islands in the South Pacific, where he had the status of British resident. After the natives had completed the walk, their leader turned to one of the Englishmen, a man named Goodwin, and handed him his wand of tea leaves, saying, I hand my mana to you. Lead your friends through the oven. To a man, the Englishmen removed their shoes and socks and set out after Goodwin across the stones. Goodwin, Gudgeon, and a Dr. George Craig were unharmed by the walk, but Craig's brother William disobeyed the clear instructions he had been given and looked back before he had completed the traverse. His feet were severely burned and he was unable to walk for several weeks. 30 minutes after the walk, Colonel Gudgeon and his friends, perhaps scarcely believing what they had accomplished, began to speculate as to what the temperature of the stones might actually be. In response, the native leader tossed his wand of green tea leaves onto the stones, and the Englishman had the satisfaction of seeing it flame almost at once. So they thought it was some kind of trick, but by seeing the leaves burst into flames, realised it truly was mana that got them across. Oh, I love stories like this. I really do. It just, as a shaman, as a witch, and as a Jew, as a daughter of the gods, fills me with joy and delight. And peace too, knowing there are more things in heaven and earth than you can even begin to comprehend. Who said that? Was it Jesus? No, it was someone else. Horatio. What's the actual quote? Let's get this right, people of earth, because my mind is slowly unravelling with age. It's from Hamlet, my darlings. Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Shakespeare, by the way, means shaking your spear, means penis. Shh, don't tell William Shakespeare that, don't want to offend him, but that's his name, that's what it means. In Act 1, Scene 5 of Shakespeare's play Hamlet, Hamlet says to his friend, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." Well, I was almost there. Hamlet has been told by the night watch that the ghost of his father has appeared to them. Hamlet and his friend Horatio go up to the battlements, and the ghost appears. Horatio is a practical, down-to-earth scholar, and he is stunned by this. He doesn't believe in ghosts. He says, "Oh, day and night, but this is wondrous strange." Hamlet replies, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." He is suggesting that the human imagination is limited and that there are many things we don't know, things that haven't been discovered, and in fact, things we haven't even dreamt of. Right, it goes on, but I'll let you study that at your own time and pace, people of earth. I don't know why I thought that was Jesus. Oh yes, I think I was confusing it with my father's house has many mansions, etc., etc., etc. In other words, it's a big, big multiverse, and there's many things that our human minds can barely comprehend with our 5 senses something's come down to mana, your spirit, your soul, your innate magical power, people of Earth. Right, let us continue on. Almost immune to death. If I am killed by common assassins, and especially by my brothers the Russian peasants, you have nothing to fear, wrote the mad monk Grigory Yefimovich Rasputin in December 1916 to his protector, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. But if I am murdered by boyars, nobles, and if they shed my blood, their hands will remain soiled with my blood. Brothers will kill brothers, and they will kill each other, and there will be no nobles in the country. Quite a curse which happened to come true. Rasputin, a filthy, rude-mannered, lecherous, hard-drinking peasant, renowned for his hypnotic powers and healing skills. So he wasn't all bad. Yin and Yang, people with yin and fucking yang, or the Russian equivalent, light and dark, swirling infinity. Hallelujah. Was the most feared and detested person in Russia because of his sway over the royal family. The Tsar, and especially the Tsar's wife, the Princess Alexandra, who believed he had miraculously saved the life of their haemophiliac son, were devoted to him. In 1914, Rasputin had survived being knifed in the stomach by a peasant woman. Now, even as he wrote of his anticipated murder, several palace noblemen, led by Prince Felix Yusupov, were busy plotting it. Inviting Rasputin to Yusupov's palace the night of December 29, 1916. They arranged that he should be the first to arrive and laid out wine and cake for him. Who doesn't like wine and cake, especially in the freezing wastelands of Russia in the middle of winter, am I right? By the gods. While he awaited the others, he helped himself generously to both, not suspecting that the refreshments were loaded with potassium cyanide. Well, that's just nasty, isn't it? It's a very nasty way to die. While Yusupov arrived and found his guest, when is the word? When Yusupov arrived and found his guest unaffected by the cyanide, he shot him in the back. Rasputin crumpled to the floor and was pronounced dead. A while later, the conspirators returned to pick up the corpse and take it to the Neva River. But Rasputin sprang to life and, crawling on his hands and knees, pursued the terrified Yusupov up a flight of stairs. Shot twice more, the monk fell. Certain that he was finally dead, the nobles kicked and battered him took his body to the river, smashed a hole in the ice, and shoved him into the frigid water. To their disbelief, Rasputin was still breathing as they did so. When his body was retrieved 2 days later, his right hand was found upon his chest with 3 fingers in a sign of benediction. His predictions of what would follow his death and his curse on his murderers were soon realized with the Russian Revolution of 1917. For the prophecy of the manner of Rasputin's death, see page 27, which we might do that. I've always found him an interesting character. Apparently he had quite a way with the women, quite a way. He was a bit of a lad. That's why they put monk in inverted commas, because he's not exactly a celibate man, nor an asexual man for that matter, but he was a powerful man with big mana. Look at the means of his death and how he just kept forging ahead, forging ahead, forging ahead. They had to fucking put him inside ice to finally kill him. Nasty. Anyway, Rasputin's mesmerizing eyes. My grandmother had fucking crazy eyes too. I've noticed mine are getting a bit crazier as I age too. What's with that, people of Earth? I don't know. Anyway, I'm not too bothered since, we all have our own destinies, people of Earth. Anyway, Rasputin's mesmerizing eyes, a key to his power, were once described by Prince Yusupov, who later claimed to be the monk's murderer. His eyes shone before me like a kind of phosphorescent light. From them came 2 rays that flowed into each other and merged into a glowing circle. I was gradually falling into the power of this mysterious man. Have a good look at him again. I kind of, look, he wasn't perfect. He could be a bit of a bastard too, quite frankly. But look at him. Amazing. Amazing. Let's be fair. Have to always be fair, people of Earth. Right, let's have a look at this.